Go to TAPgiles.com to learn dreams, engage my services, and support the channel. So I'm pressing buttons on the D-pad to move around the thing, and it takes kind of the most logical route sort of thing. And I can just make whatever shape thing I want. So I could make a grid over here, and you can imagine this could be like an inventory. And it all still works perfectly fine with no kind of manual stuff. And that's all the logic that is in one of these items. So it's fairly simple, but it kind of lets you be able to make any shape of thing. If it was just a grid or just up and down, then I'd probably just use a selector, and I've got tutorials on that. But this is useful for when it's like a mixture or some of them are just not in a grid whatsoever. So first I'll make a cube and give it some logic, like that. And when it's active, I'll just make the cube glow a little bit like that. So the basic idea of this is I'll make a selector object over here. That doesn't need to glow, we'll make it white and slightly bigger. And this will teleport to whichever is the active cube. So let me go over here. So this is the active item, like that. And this will teleport to the active item. And I'll use up and down on the D-pad to go active item. And I'll adjust this so that wherever that tag is will be kind of out in front a bit like that. And now it teleports like that. If you didn't do that, it would teleport so that that central dot is on the tag, so it'll just completely engulf it. So I'll just do that again. So the selector is going to help the items figure out if they are the new current item. So first I'm just going to make it so that I can push right, and then it will skip to the next one on the right. So first we need to know if the item is actually to the right of the current item. So for that I'll have a trigger zone, and I'll have it on cube mode. You can put that on the right like that. And thin it out a bit. The size and range can be adjusted depending on how you want it to work, to get it to work perfectly for your particular menu, for example. Cool, so that trigger zone is going to look for a tag in here. The tag is called allowed. So if we want the items to the right of the current item to be allowed, then we'll turn on this trigger zone. We use up and down the D-pad to get allowed. So if we have second one over here without the active item, it's gone to there, and the trigger zone needs to come out a bit like that. There we go. Now the trigger zone is highlighting this tag, but not this tag, which means that this item is allowed to be selected next. But then if you have more than one of them, like that, then both of them will be allowed because they're both to the right of the current item. So we want another factor to it. We want the closest one to the current item and also to the right. So we'll have another tag over here called closest. And we will use a follower in here. So a follower will move, we'll just use that closest tag, teleporter off as well. The follower will move towards the closest tag it can find of the right name. So if we have another one that's further away, then it will still only go towards the closest one. And you can see it actually lights up that tag just as it lit the trigger zone lit up the other tag. And in here, that closest tag isn't being lit up. So we can use that to know that this is the closest one to that, and also it's allowed by the trigger zone. So for allowed by the trigger zone, we also want to know if it's the closest, and if it's the closest and allowed, then we can be the active item. So I'll put the strength and damping and speed to 0. This means it won't affect it won't actually move this object, it will just leave it alone, but it will still give us that ability down here. What I'll do to set the initial position is I'll have a timeline over here with a tag in it, and zoom in with L1 and right, and just make sure it lasts a frame, and then just position it correctly. Okay, so it goes there because it's powered just for a short period of time at the beginning of the timeline, and then it won't be powered again, and now it will use whatever's going on here. So yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll have another tag that says if it's the current item. And this will be detected by a trigger zone, so I'll just have this be a sphere, press triangle on the gizmo so it's central to the chip, and I'll just make it quite small, and now have that look for the current item tag. And I'll do that, and it needs to be out in front like that, how we moved it before, so I'll do that. And now when it gets to the new current item, it will be selected like that again. So we'll have that selected like that. So that outputs from the tag output. So we can use that signal to power this keyframe, which makes that item glow. So now the item itself knows that it is the current item. And now if I copy that, and I'll just have a switch in here to turn this stuff on for testing moving right. So we have that off, and then if we turn that on, it goes to the next one. Oh, we've done that on the wrong thing. Need that allowed one. Yeah, and then we turn that on, and then it goes to the new item, and the item is told that it's now kind of selected. So now we want to kind of activate this stuff when I actually push right on the D-pad. So if I get a controller sensor and put it into remote controllable mode, then I'm just going to use the D-pad. You could do a quick bit of logic to use the left stick local as well as the D-pad if you wanted to, but for making this quick, I'll just use the D-pad. So when I push right, I want to power that. And I guess we can just leave the follower on all the time. So I'm going to hold L1 while I press right on the D-pad, and it still activates, but it doesn't undo and redo and stuff. So I can press left and right, and it doesn't mess anything up. So just to double check, if I have another one like that, let's do that. Yeah, so because it was on for more than one frame, it kind of skipped along. So I'll just have a signal manipulator so that instead of it being just actually how long I'm holding it down for, I'll turn it into a pulse, and then it will just turn on for one frame. So only is right, there you go, and if I just hold right on the D-pad, nothing else happens, so that's good. And then I'll do the same for the other directions. Left, right, up, down, now works fine. So now I have some kind of arbitrary positions. And I'll set up a camera. And this is a little display I put together so you can see what I'm doing with the D-pad. So that's all working fine. And you can go up and down like that. Can't quite go up to that. That's because the trigger zone isn't quite tall enough to catch it. So then you can adjust things like just make it slightly taller, or you could move that down a bit, depending on what you want to do. So now I can go right to that one. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something interesting. Go to patreon.com/TAPgiles to learn something new every day.